I'm Steph Stricklen with GeekWire Studios here at AWS reInvent. Boy, have we talked about a lot of fascinating companies and how they are solving problems for so many customers in the space. I want to introduce you right now to a guest of mine. This is Chris Kent, the CMO at Metronome. How are you doing today, Chris?
I'm good, thank you for having me.
I'm glad you're here. Tell folks a little bit about Metronome.
Yeah, so Metronome, we are a monetization infrastructure company that really focuses on like usage-based billing and really kind of connecting products with how people consume and buy products, and then also the monetization angle on what does that actually end up meaning to the business in terms of fully monetizing a product line.
Well, let's actually talk about that. Monetization infrastructure. What does that mean in terms of the problems that your company is solving for?
Yeah, so I think as software has evolved over the last 2 decades, the way that companies basically bill for software has really changed fundamentally. And because of like the volume you're seeing with AI and all this kind of explosion, it's really kind of changed how people need to respond to billing and product usage, and the pure scale of the things that need to be run is that now billing has to be kind of run as an infrastructure alongside of like your regular stack. And so what Metronome really kind of focuses on is providing a platform or infrastructure that allows the largest companies in the world like OpenAI and Anthropic to run billing at this massive scale, which is a completely different challenge than what they're kind of used to running, which could have been like maybe it's a back office problem, or it could have just been some software that sits on the on the same platform as they're running. But now just at the scale alone, it's creating this like inflection point where you actually have to run it as its own thing, and that's where Metronome kind of comes in.
One of the things that's interesting to me in what you said, the problems that you're solving are obviously for the companies themselves, but what they provide ultimately is flexibility for their end user, their customer.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how that sort of comes 360. This gives me, as the user of OpenAI, ChatGPT, whatever subscription-based service, however I'm choosing to pay and engage with something, the opportunity to do so at many levels that actually work for me.
Yeah, and I think that's a big driver that's been happening with, or maybe the catalyst of AI, and you highlighted it really well there, which is the way people are consuming technology or software now is fundamentally changed, right? Like before, maybe subscriptions were more, I'm going to pay a certain amount of money and then I'm going to get access to data or access to a service. And now AI is doing a lot of the work for you. So like the kind of expectation is shifting to, maybe I want to pay for the outcome. Maybe I want to pay for the work being done. Maybe I want to pay for the different aspects or a way that the products are built. And I think one of the interesting things about like monetization and billing today, along with AI, is like opening up the visibility and usage. So like you can't, or you probably don't want to spend, I don't know, whatever the amount would be, and not know what you're getting out of it. Am I getting the value? Am I using it the way I want? And so really the metrics have changed dramatically, and now it's a lot more that the users now have the power, because they're changing to the software that really kind of impacts what they're doing. And I think the way that like companies are using like Metronome and other companies now is, how do you provide that visibility? Like how do you provide the insights into what I'm using? So like some of these companies you mentioned, I can see monthly what I'm doing, so I'm like, oh, I'm actually getting value out of this, I'm going to keep going.
And information for the company itself to go, people don't like that, they don't want that, they're not, I mean, it's transparency that is sort of multi-layered. Can you give me a couple of real world examples of companies that this has supported so people can really wrap their heads around it?
Yeah, well, I think one of the interesting things is you're kind of at this intersection right now where you have like what we call AI natives, so people like that started the company in the last several years, let's say, but they're born in this kind of AI era, so they don't really have the history of all the different software that they had to run. And then you have the other side, which is they've run subscriptions or they've run seats-based licensing for the last maybe decade or so. And those two worlds need to live together. And so a lot of the like kind of real world example is you see a lot of companies here that are trying to figure out how do we get our 10 years of customers to now use AI, because AI is really changing fundamentally how things are priced, how things are billed, how things are consumed. And the biggest challenge for that is, before, like with software, you could say, hey, we're going to charge for access or a seat or whatever, and that's going to be for the year. And then maybe like you have some margins and stuff on the back end that impact that. But AI's kind of changed, because really however much you use AI could dramatically impact or materially impact the COGS, the margins. And so it really changes how companies need to make sure that they're accounting for the different spend. So you're seeing this kind of like marriage of this kind of maybe like the previous world of like seats and subscriptions with this more like outcome and value-based pricing. And the interesting thing about it is, like, you have these two worlds where the AI companies, they don't have to worry about seats and subscriptions, or maybe they do because of like their enterprise contracts. But so really I think the challenge of where we're at today is cleanly mapping value to how you're billing for a customer.
Let me ask you finally.
Yeah.
You have many customers here. We
Yeah.
can see several even just behind us. What are the conversations that are happening here in the context of AWS reInvent with your customers?
Yeah, I think that the number one thing we're seeing either at the booth or like people I'm talking to is we are running at way more usage than we ever planned, which is a super exciting problem for them to have, right? But I think it also creates an inflection point that they haven't really maybe planned for. And this is one thing I think, again, not to like talk too much about AI, but I think AI is creating this thing where a lot of the companies that are customers or we're talking to, they're in the middle of that hockey stick, right? And so they don't want to like mess up that momentum, and they don't want to slow things down, but whether it's on the business side or the customer side, they have to kind of align with it. So I think the number one thing is like, how do we make pricing and packaging, how do we make billing and consumption, and then how do we connect all that from monetization down through your ERP and your whole quote to cash stack? Like, how do we make all that work together? Because a lot of people haven't really like thought about it in like terrible depth, and this has kind of been the inflection point for it.
Metronome clearly up to the task. Thank you so much for your time
Thank
today.
you, I really appreciate it.
I'm Steph Stricklen. You've been watching GeekWire Studios.